So we'll go ahead and launch in as folks join into the room. As I mentioned, this is related to the FX Definitions Market Participant Survey, and we're specifically going to go over just a few reminders of things in terms of what's related to the survey for your submission and participation, as well as review some questions that we've been speaking about with members and other market participants as we've gone through the survey in the last several weeks, and take any new questions that you all may have during the course of this webinar. So I wanted to remind folks in the chat, you'll see there's been a link to the ISDA Definitions Market Participant Survey webpage through ISDA's website. Wanted to remind folks of the resources there and what's available to you. So in addition to the direct survey response link, which is on that page, there is a Word version of the survey that you can download in order to prepare your answers and review any of the topics beforehand. We found in the past that in doing these types of surveys, that's quite useful for folks in order to discuss questions internally with other members of their organization. Perhaps you add comments or take your own answers back and then chat with them about them with your colleagues. In order to develop the responses ahead of submitting the actual survey. We are asking, as I think we've expressed to folks before, that people coordinate and consolidate their responses for their organization as much as feasible. So for many organizations, we already know who those folks are that will be your consolidating and coordinating participants in order to submit the questions for the survey. If you do not know who those people are for your organization, please feel free to reach out to us at isdalegal@isda.org, and we can let you know if we have folks who are coordinating for your organization, who those people are. On that ISDA ISDA webpage for the survey as well, in addition to the survey link and the Word version, we also have a link to the prior webinar on the survey. That includes a review of why the survey is being undertaken, the categories of questions that we're looking at, as well as a demonstration of the ISDA My Library platform, which is helpful for people who may not be as familiar with the digital way in which ISDA publishes its documentation today, and which we would be undertaking for any future engagement on the FX definitions. So with that in mind, I want to go over a few questions that we've gotten or that we've discussed with members as we've gone through the survey in the last several weeks. My colleagues from ISDA Legal and ISDA Market Infrastructure and Technology are also on the call in order to answer some of these questions for you in the most comprehensive way possible. So I'll go ahead and kick that off. And then if you do have other questions as we go through, please let me know. I will remind you that the survey due date is this Friday, May 19th. That is to give folks, we think, enough time. We've given several weeks for people to respond. But if you are having issues meeting this timeline or you anticipate you may not be able to respond by that date, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll discuss with you a date that makes sense where we can anticipate you guys getting in a timely answer, but which gives you the time you need to respond appropriately. So the first question I'll go ahead and take. So we've talked to people, and in the last year or so, it has been really helpful to talk to people about what kind of things in the FX space are really on their mind. And one thing that's top of mind is disruption events. I think in light of recent events in the Russia-Ukraine situation, as well as other things, this has come up as one that's very top of mind for people. And we've had folks ask us that in light of these events, what is ISDA considering with respect to Article 5 and disruption events? With respect to disruption events in particular, I want to point people to questions 29 through 31 of the survey. Those specifically hone in on Article 5, the disruption events section, and ask people what they're interested in examining, both in terms of deliverable and non-deliverable currencies. And also ask for additional considerations for people to consider whether we should consider amending current disruption events or fallbacks, adding additional disruption events or fallback, and potentially developing different consequences for different disruption events. So those, I think, should give people a good space to be able to respond, and we have lots of open-ended sections there for people to respond with their specific thoughts as well. I will mention that this portion of the survey is part 2B, and that section, it really dives in deep into a lot of different topics with respect to FX definitions and potential changes or additions or things we could work on. So if you are interested in that topic, please make sure you review that section and answer those questions. You're not required to answer any questions on the survey, so it's really up to you to focus on what things for your institution are the most important. Another question that we've had or have discussed with folks as we've gone through is what would the timeline be for implementation of changes to the FX definitions? So to answer that question, I'm going to turn to my colleague Ann Battle from FX Legal to give us some insights.
Hi, thanks, Megan. So the timing really depends on both the scope of what the changes are going to be, as well as feedback from market participants and infrastructure providers regarding the timing that they need. So I would encourage you to give feedback on that. As a market participant, thinking about other priorities now and in the coming years. And also, if you're a market participant who is aware of infrastructure that will be affected by this, we definitely need to hear from them regarding timing as well. So please do reach out either to ISDA Legal or in your survey response with that information. I think assuming that we're going to go forward with something, work could begin later this year. And then if that is, simply what we refer to as, option A, where we are going to make some updates in the current framework, then we would look for implementation in the coming year or so based on how long it takes to finalize those updates and what timing is required for infrastructure providers. However, if we are going to create and launch a new booklet that is natively digital with substantive changes, that is likely to be a several year-long project. And we'll use the feedback to this survey and likely additional feedback that we'll need from market participants to set the dates for that. And there we will, if that is the approach we take, we'll be looking to balance the time that market participants need against not putting this on too long of a timetable so that people run out of steam. And then similarly, we've also put forward the approach C, where we would be creating a natively digital book, but the implementation of substantive changes may be more staggered. And that approach in and of itself is a timeline. And so we would use the feedback to this survey. So I guess the short answer to that is you tell us, right?
Yes, definitely. That's part of why we're doing the survey, is to make sure that we get that input. But I think the different approaches certainly will have different implications for timing. So that's very helpful. Thanks, Anne. Another question that we've been speaking with participants about is how will ISDA and EMTA, as the co-publishers of the FX definitions, ensure that the updates made to the definitions will work well with the technology solutions, both internally to ISDA and externally? So things like digital regulatory reporting, smart contracts, as well as sort of the digital roadmap and its sort of implementation that ISDA undertakes through my library. So to give us a little bit more about that, I'm going to turn to my colleague, Michelangelo DiMarzio from our Market Infrastructure and Technology team.
Hi. Okay. Hi. Thanks, Megan. So just to answer this question, so first of all, I think it's fair to say that ISDA has experience in implementing ISDA documentation that is regularly updated into market infrastructure. So, for example, following the implementation of the 2021 ISDA definitions, ISDA agreed to update that booklet, the interested booklet, on a quarterly basis alongside infrastructure providers and market participants. So just to give you some ideas of how that may work on the FX space, should we go that path, these regular updates conducted on the interest rate booklet are published in my library, which has a compare functionality, which shows the black line between versions, between one version and the previous one, also others. This functionality was actually illustrated in the first webinar that we held last month, which you can see also a link for it on the ISDA webpage where the survey is. So upon publishing a new version in my library, ISDA also published the corresponding release notes, which summarize the changes that are being performed on that particular version. In terms of how this update mechanism may look like for the effects definition, well, this is not yet determined. As you know, we're still gathering market participants' view on their preferred approach as part of the survey. So as also Anne pointed out, the way that we will go with this will also depend on the views that are expressed with regards to the architecture approach, either A, B, or C, or variations thereof. So if there is an appetite to provide a functionality in the effects definitions allowing for future updates, then I would imagine that the malabry version functionality and the corresponding compare functionality would come in very handy. In that case, I think it would be really helpful to collaborate very closely with market participants and market structures who utilize effects definitions to understand their implementation requirements and their timelines, just to ensure that they are capable of maintaining their updates in alignment with the updates of the booklet, and they're able to handle the changes as they are deployed in the effects definition book. To assist with that, ISDA has been conducting a market infrastructure mapping exercise, which aims at identifying who are the main FX market infrastructure providers that may be impacted by an update to the survey to the FX definition. So all of this work is really aimed at trying to understand who the main players are and what an update to the booklet may mean for them. ISDA has also experience in facilitating updates to market infrastructures in the FX space. So a recent example is the work that is currently taking place to implement the 2022 Bear Event Supplement into market infrastructure. So this, as part of that work, ISDA is closely working with Swift to ensure that they are able to release on their platform an update to allow confirmation of barrier options and barrier and binary transactions in line with the new supplement. So a similar initiative with relevant electronic platforms and market infrastructure providers may be undertaken in preparation for any update to the FX definition, should that be needed. In terms of facilitating implementation of the effect definitions to new technology providers and new technology solutions that may want to enter the FX market, ISDA has also experience in that, and the most concrete example is through the CDM, the Common Domain Model, which is a data model that in which derivative products, corresponding business events, and data points are standardized and are made available to the industry to utilize in a consistent manner. This allows market participants to have a common understanding of how derivative products work and what the inputs and outputs would be, all of it in a consistent fashion, which would give everyone the same answer should an event occur, such as, for example, it could be a new transaction, or it could be an ovation, it could be an unwind, etc. So by providing, by expanding the CDM in alignment with the new booklet, the new FX booklet, should we go down that route, then that would allow new solution providers to be able to provide solution without having to create a data model from scratch, because that would be already provided through the CDM. And so all of a sudden you have alignment of understanding between the FX definitions, a data model, and then infrastructure providers would be providing tech solutions for particular issues in the FX market. So these are things that we could be looking at should we go down the route. But as I mentioned, ISDA has already experience in looking at these aspects for other asset classes or for other documentation also in the FX space.
Thanks so much, Mike. I think it's also helpful to understand that we do have questions about this in the survey, right? So specifically questions 40, 43, and 45. If you have views on sort of the best ways that we can implement these technology solutions or things we should be considering with respect to market infrastructure providers, please feel free to weigh in the survey with your views. We really do appreciate your feedback. Another question that we've received is with respect to who can participate in the survey or what kind of people are we targeting to respond to the survey. We do want to make it clear that the ISDA survey is open to all market participants, be they members of ISDA or EMTA or not. And so we do encourage you, as I think Anne mentioned before, if you have folks that you are, perhaps a market infrastructure provider that you work with, that utilizes the FX definitions, and you think to yourself, well, if you make a change, I want to make sure that this vendor or this market infrastructure provider is aware because they may have a view on how things get implemented, and I don't want them to be caught off guard because that would affect me. That's the kind of entity that we would love to participate in the survey as well, and for us to be aware of. So we would love for you to please encourage those folks to participate in the survey. You can also reach out to us with their information, and we're happy to invite them to participate if that's helpful as well. Once we have feedback from the survey and we determine in consultation with our board and our membership how to proceed, ISDA and EMTA will work further to develop and implement those changes in consultation with our membership, engaging in additional market outreach as required, as Anne mentioned earlier. So I think it's, we'd like to hear as many voices as we can. We've already received responses from members and non-members alike, and we anticipate, of course, receiving more as the deadline approaches. But just want to encourage everyone to participate there, as many as possible. Again, I think I mentioned this earlier in the call, but in case people have joined, if you do have further questions beyond what we're going through here, let us know in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will respond to those once we've kind of gone through. We have one more, I think, question that we're going through now, and then if you have additional questions, please you let us know. Another question that we sort of wanted to go through with you all is what would it look like really to consolidate all the FX definitions into a single booklet, right? If we go this route of either, I think, architectural option B or C in some flavor, how would it look like to really put everything together, the definitions, the MCAs, the additional provisions, the supplements, how we work with EMTA? And so I'm going to let my colleague Anne Battle give some of that feedback, and then I'll weigh in if that's helpful too. Go ahead, Anne.
Sure. Thanks, Megan. Some of this is pretty straightforward because, as many of you know, the supplements to the FX definitions are actually additional articles. And so consolidating that would take the form of republishing of book of the FX definitions, which would be natively digital, but we would still probably colloquially call it a book. And it would just have those supplements as articles. One advantage to that approach would be when entering into a confirm, the two counterparties would just need to reference the definitional booklet. They would not also need to reference the applicable supplement. So it would be much more straightforward. And that's the way that incorporation of definitions works in other products, for example, rates, where we now have the 2021 definitions that can be updated by publishing a new version. And then counterparties only need to reference the booklet, the 2021 definitions, and then the most recent version as of the date of the transaction applies to that transaction. Other things, MCAs, templates, I think once again, we are looking for your feedback. Those don't lend themselves quite as well to becoming an article. However, those of you who are familiar with my library and some of our more recent definitional booklets are familiar with different components. We can still digitize that aspect of the documentation and put them on my library as a component of the definitional booklet. That has a lot of advantages, and we hope it will also have some future advantages. Right now, there is hyperlinking available within each component, And we're working in the future to have hyperlinking across components. So by having something like an MCA as a component of a consolidated definitional booklet that can be updated by versioning, hopefully in the future we'll have the ability to hyperlink between those, which would be really helpful, among other things, for understanding the definitions of terms and the MCA. But again, as I said, and as has been one theme of this call, we would really appreciate feedback on how market participants think the consolidation of the booklet and the use of components for other aspects of the broader FX documentation landscape would work best.
Thanks, Anne. I think that's a great overview. Again, I think, as Anne said, the theme of this is that we need your feedback in order to make sure that we're sort of going directionally correct on these potential changes. So with that, I don't see any additional questions in the chat during the course of this discussion. But should you have any further questions, please reach out to isdalegal@isda.org. And if it's not our sort of bailiwick, we will direct you in the right direction. And I also want to remind you of the webpage again. It's been dropped into the chat, but the FX webpage there, where the survey response is, there's a Word version of the survey, as well as the prior webinar that Mika mentioned earlier, which includes a review of the My Library platform and how that would work in a natively digital format for FX. Again, the survey due date is May 19th. That's this Friday. If you do anticipate that you're going to have some challenges meeting that deadline, please do reach out to us at isdalegal@isda.org, and we'll discuss with you how we can sort of extend that to make sure that we're getting a timely response, but giving you guys the time you need to respond appropriately. So thank you very much for everyone joining us today, and please reach out to us with any further questions, and we look forward to receiving your responses on the survey. Have a great day, everyone.